Okay, we're holding Hilchos Basar בחלב, Siman Tzadik Hey. Towards the end, we'll review a little bit Sif Dalad, and then we'll go on to Sif Hey, Vav, and Zayin, and we'll do an Akdama for Siman Tzadik Vav, an important Siman. I perhaps did not mention it, but I think it's a good idea to explain a little bit the Ramah, actually in the end of Sif Gimel. He speaks about various dishes being rinsed together. How we're concerned, of course, about the Tama Balua in each one getting to the other, and that we're not going to be lenient about Nat Bar Nat. We're going to be Machmir for the various reasons we explained. The actual difference between Nat Bar Nat is significant between Sephardim and Ashkenazim in more than one area. But in the case of the sink, in the case of rinsing just together, we actually have a choice. I mean, you don't have to do it together. The problem is that sometimes a person is limited, that's all he has. And he may think, well, what's the big deal? And as we mentioned, that is exactly what happens in the dishwasher, where people think, well, it shouldn't be a big deal, there are various leniencies. And it's true, in the dishwasher there are leniencies. In a sink, however, the bigger issue is the heat. Because the Ramah himself says that if we're not dealing with hot, very hot boiling water, then it's a non-issue. If we're dealing with klisheni water, then it's not a problem. Everything is mutter. Or if they were washed one after the other. However, he says, if you poured from a kli rishon al basar, eshel basar al kli chalav, then it's like a kli rishon. In other words, for this purposes of dishes, rinsing the dishes together, there may be a problem if somebody poured hot water from a kettle. It's irui. An irui, he would be like a kli rishon.
Did he say specifically on the heat, or was it? I thought I heard you say.
Yeah, I didn't explain very well this point because it does make a difference what exactly he poured. So here we're talking about him iromi kli rishon shel basar al kli chalav, or the other way around. He's pouring from a fleishike pot onto the Melicha pot. We're not talking about the next case. If you pour just boiling water, just plain water, even if there was shuman davak by makol shari, because the iro is not so strong, that that's, you cannot go ahead and take from this one, put it to the other one. But the first instance where he says pouring, where it's a problem, is pouring from a fleishike pot onto a Melicha pot. So the water is coming out from a fleishike pot, or the other way around, from a Melicha pot. That's going to be a problem. That you don't want to pour, obviously, from fleishiks onto Melichis. But if you're pouring from a kettle, parva water, boiling water on top of them, let's say somebody was doing iri as hagola. Iri can be used sometimes as hagola for things that are used in an iro way. But they're together, so but the evidence, it's okay. I mean, I wouldn't do it lechatchila. Kol shari. The last detail, however, was interesting. That if one found a ka'arach choleves ben klei basar, if you found a milchike plate amongst fleishike plates, it happens actually all the time with cutlery. Oh, what's this fleishike cutlery doing with the milchike cutlery? Or what's this milchike spoon doing with the fleishike? Because whoever put them together didn't sort them out right. But not necessarily. What happens if they were washed together? That was the concern. So the Ramah says, if you find them together, don't panic. It does not necessarily mean that they were washed together. And the question is, why not? That's what we didn't. I don't think I explained why not. I think the class talks about this. It's brought down also by others. There's various reasons. Why shouldn't be choishesh that they were actually washed together in a forbidden way, in a way that would make them both usher? And the reason the reason is because you have a sfek, a suffix if they were washed together or not. And even if you say they were, perhaps one of them was an eino ben yoima, right? So the one that you found, for example. And as we said in the Ramah before, the biggest problems we have with things in a dishwasher or in a sink is if they're ben yoimim. If one of them is not a ben yoimim, then they're both going to be okay. The one that's a ben yoimim is getting a tam, which is a non ben yoimim, which makes it basically a not bar nat, because there's no iser. The one that is an eina ben yoimim is an eina ben yoimim, right? As he says over here. Also, shuhu ben yomor is motor dehu gamu mekabe. Also, shuhu ben yomor gam ken eno nesem noisa shuhu ben yomor de noisin tamu, and it's still a heter. By the time it gets to the eno ben yomor, it's still a heter. In other words, either way you look at them, they're both going to be okay. So that was with the nat bar nat situation there. That we went on to Sif Dalet to explain that the Mechaber very much holds of Afer. If Afer is introduced to the water, that it could be to some advantage. He's not talking about a dishwasher. Well, we know it's an advantage, but that by itself is not the advantage. We are lenient with the dishwasher for other reasons too. But here, he was concerned about Shuman. After all, sometimes dishes are not completely clean. We're not only dealing with the Belua, we're dealing with Shuman. And he says that even according to him, if there was Shuman in the previous Seif, you have mamashas, and you would need shishin keneged the mamashas. You wouldn't just say not bar not. You had mamashas. It wouldn't work. When do you say not bar not? When you actually have it coming out from the walls of the kelim to the water, from the water into the other one. You know, you have several steps, but once you have ba'ain, once you have shuman, you don't really have a not bar not. You have the real isser present. So he says, but I have a solution for that. That was Sif Dala. The solution for the Shuman was that, if you happen to have had Afer, I'm saying if you have had, but have had, because Lechatchila, it seems to be a consensus that we're not going to do this either way, right? Even if you have Afer, not everybody will agree, go ahead and do it. Go ahead and wash it with the Shuman there because you have Afer. Because as it is, the Shach and Taz and others are concerned that this Afer is not a real Noisim Tam Lefgam. But if it is, according to Machaber, it is, that if it's really something that is poiging the water, then it's going to poiging the Shuman too. So if the Efer was there before you put the Kederis in, that's also a condition by the dishwashers, that we know that for sure it got there on time to the dishes. Otherwise, if you have hot water rinsing without soap introduced yet, then what is that going to help you? So we said don't use it at the same time. That's for sure not. So the Mechaber is the one that held that Afer can be helpful with Shuman, and because it's a noise and tam lefgam. All right, so we are familiar already with the idea of noise and tam lefgam. We know that can be very helpful in various situations. Isur too. Not by not did not help us with Isur, because it's Usur. It remains Usur, no matter that it traveled in several stages. Not by not works with Hetera. Very interesting concept that can work with Hetera, but not with Isur. But with an Isur, you can have Nois and Tam Lefgam. That's a big help. The Kli was treif. The caterer forgot to be machsheret. He's doing the kitchen. And he used it by mistake, or it got mixed up, or whatever. Yeah, but it hasn't been used for 24 hours. That can make a difference of whether I can eat the food or not. But the evet, sure, if you have lots of food, you're concerned with hefsed meruba, you're concerned with all kinds of shilas, we need to know. That detail is an important detail. And between milk and meat as well. Has it been used in the last 24 hours or not? Makes a world of a difference. All right. Now we're going on to the last three seifim, very short seifim, easy relatively. Mechaber says, "Ein manichin kli sheyesh bo kutach etzel kli sheyesh bo melach." Don't put a kli, bowl, that has a milchik dish called a kutach. They used to make this kind of a dish, which was a little bit salty. It had some milk or cheese in it. Quite popular dish, but it was milchik, obviously. And the Mechaber says, don't lechatchila put a kli sheyesh bo kutach etzel kli sheyesh bo melach, next to a bowl that contains salt. Why not? This is a question that was raised in the Gemara. That's where this is taken from. Very interesting. You may wonder, what's the big deal? Salt is parv. Milk dish, the two are next to each other. What can go wrong? Well, there's another problem. Salt is a condiment. Can we call it a condiment? Or is it a spice? Or is it something else? Anyway, that is used on many, many dishes, including fleishik dishes, not just milchik dishes, right? So what's the problem? If you have them next to each other, some of the kutach might get into the melach, and you may end up using that melach with meat. Yeah. They're separate and next to each other. This is lechatchila. Remember, this is a din of lechatchila. Ein manichin. Doesn't say asar, right? Doesn't say you're in trouble if you did. It says ein manichin. Don't put a kli sheyesh bo kutach. It's a kli sheyesh bo melach. Aval, and this is all pretty much quoting from the Gemara. Aval mutar lanicho. It's a kli sheyesh bo chometz. You can put it next to a bowl of sorts that has vinegar. Vinegar is also something that is used with various kinds of dishes. The Rama adds that the main concern is dafka im kelim megulim, if the kelim are without a cover. Rafilu hachi, even if they were uncovered, you made a mistake, you put them next to each other, mutar. It's okay, nothing happened. Lo chayshinan, we're really not overly concerned. Shema nofal ela melach, that he fell into the melach. Now what's the problem over here? So what if it falls into the melach? So there's a machlokes rishonim.
When he says v'dafka imakelim,
Right.
which case is he talking about? Vinegar or
The melach. That he recommends not putting it next to melach is only if they're megulim. But we're going to see.
Because normally he should put it. So I'm asking. The Rama doesn't wait till a whole nekudah.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
then he adds it in between where.
Right.
It's just referring back.
You don't know what he's talking about. Yeah. Right. It's a little, yeah. But anyway, this is a relatively easier halacha to understand, even though there's a machlokes, it's relatively easier to understand what the concern is, and it's only a lechatchila din. But what is the machlokes? Interesting machlokes rishonim on what's the isser of having the two, because the Gemara doesn't really tell us. Well, the Gemara does say the potential problem, but it's not so clear. And I'll tell you why in a moment. It's not so clear. It's not 100% clear. Rashi says, based on the way the Gemara reads and how he reads it, that there's a chashash, there's a concern that some of that kutach might get into the melach. So, you'll see it, no? And you won't put that melach into the meat, if it did. So Rashi says, no. You may not see it, you may forget. That's pshat in the Gemara. You may not see it, you may forget. It's bottle? No, it's not. Why not? Because it's ba'in. And we learned that many times, that if the isser is ba'in, that you didn't see it, you didn't notice it, but if you could see it, it's not bottle. And you may make that mistake. In other words, a mistake may happen, and you may use it for the meat, that's all. Why won't you notice it? So I saw the Taz adds a little bit of detail that helps understand why you may not notice it. Not necessarily because you will forget, which is also true, but because kutach and melach are the same color. They're both white. Interesting. I thought it was interesting. Additional detail of why you may not notice it. Same color. But ba'ain it is. And it's not bottle. Oh. So choimetz. That's the second example, but with vinegar. Since it will dissolve in the vinegar, it will become bottle. What if it's not bottle? Then you will notice it. The Meforshim explained that if the kutach is not bottle with such a large amount in the vinegar, or the vinegar is a small amount, the coloration will be noticed. Bottle occurs when the quantities are there to actually dissolve it completely. And since it's soluble, I guess, the vinegar, then it will dissolve. You won't notice it. It won't be ba'in. So it will be really bottle.
Even if the vinegar was not 60, so long as it dissolves,
No, first of all, the vinegar dissolves it.
Right.
So it's not ba'in. It's not ba'in, it's bottle.
But you don't need shishim in the vinegar.
You do need shishim.
As long as it dissolves it,
Yeah. But if you're going to be using it,
in the hobbits.
right.
60.
No.
I don't know chemical.
No, then it's a problem because you have a little bit of milachix that's less than shishim here being
Dissolved.
right.
Then you're not going to. So then what would be the problem?
Well, that's what they explain, that if there's enough for it to be bottle, you're not going to see it. When are you going to see it? Nevertheless, even in choimetz, when there's not shishim, then you're going to see it, then you're going to remember. You're not going to put it in. It's going to be very noticeable. It's not the same color, right?
Holding halachically that to make shishim even if you didn't measure.
Right. If you don't see it, it's completely gone.
Maybe.
Yeah.
You first said that the vinegar
Right.
actually the salt, because it's be'ein, it's also the heat.
Right.
And it won't be.
It won't be bottle. It won't be in this bottle.
If it's shishim now and we switch to it's bottle. If it wasn't shishim, it's not bottle. Trying to get these two words.
No, it's not.
be'ein
It's not really be'ein, but it's noticeable.
Be'ein prevents.
Why is it
bit with the
noticeable?
60.
Why is it noticeable 460? In what way? And after
Well, shishim is a quantity
taste.
in taste, right? And they applied it. One of the poskim applied it here too in explaining this
Kutach is also something
this
that's
fact
liquid. No?
that it's liquidish. Yeah,
I
So it
remember.
mixes
but
together.
not completely liquid. It's more. It's a little bit solid, and that's why by
Sauce,
melach
or
it's
a
in
sauce.
between.
It's a thick sauce.
Right, it's in between. Right. So it dissolves in chemetz, but not in the melach.
Right.
Yeah.
I want to jump.
Go
I
ahead.
forget where in the but like it
Right.
says that something is also trade as spices. They're not. They could be bottled with shishim spices on because they have the coloration effect. It tends to spread more than 60.
Right.
Combination.
Yeah, there are a few items like that, very unique, that may go beyond that.
So
Very, very few.
So bring
The general rule is 60 is mevato. It's so much more that it dilutes the tam, which we're concerned whenever there is tam. And here we're concerned with tam too, or ultimately, right? Yeah. So there's one. I saw somebody explain that if there wouldn't be shishim, you would actually still notice it in the choim, in the vinegar.
but it was shishim.
I'm saying, like you, not necessarily. Perhaps you would not even notice it if there was 50
Or maybe
against
it
it.
doesn't matter. You want to tell me it matters.
Do you want to say something? Yeah.
Be'ein means discernible.
Yes,
As long as something is discernible and it's possible to identify it, bittul.
that's
The
correct.
condition for bittul to take effect is that it be discernible.
That's correct with
Okay.
Bein.
So we have two things to worry about. Number one, do we have sufficient there to mevatel it? For that we need to see.
Right.
And number two, we have a second concern. When we are mevatel it, is it still noticeable because of color, because of shape, whatever makes it noticeable? Is it
Yes.
still noticeable,
Yes.
which will prevent the bittul from permitting it?
That's correct.
So here, what we're saying, if I understand it correctly, someone was saying that whenever we will have 60 in the specific case of vinegar and kutach, in
right.
such a case,
In such a
dafka,
case, dafka.
then apparently he has the experience with kutach. And that
Yeah.
once you have 60, it will also not be discernible, and therefore
Right.
the presence of the kutach will not prevent the bittul from taking a food be'ein.
Right. Yeah.
It's very simple.
Very simple. Right. Whereas if it would be less, he says,
I mean, but
that
because
it would be
permitted.
it would be discernible, like you said.
And the discernible here isn't something that adds an additional halacha. It only gives you the guarantor that you won't eat because under 60 it won't be mispatel. So you're
Yeah.
not allowed to eat it with
Right.
meat.
Right.
And here you have the additional guarantor that because it's under 60, he says in his experience now you can see it.
You would be able to
So
see it.
therefore you'll catch yourself before you eat and say, I have kutach in here.
Whereas with kutach and the melach, you may not only forget, you may not be able to see the difference between the two because, as the Taz explains, it's the same color.
Now, a different question.
Yeah.
When you need to bottle it, you're going to add the vinegar to something else, obviously.
Yeah.
You need vinegar out of the box. So if you're going to put it into something else, can't you also include whatever you're adding the vinegar about?
Yes, that's true. Yeah, I thought
So really
somebody
you
would
would have
ask that.
60 in the combination vinegar and wherever
Yes,
you're...
that's correct. Yeah, ultimately, I don't foresee that would ever be a problem if there's a large quantity basar and liquids and all
When
kinds
do
of
you eat
things.
vinegar with meat?
Well, maybe it's a salad. It's not necessarily meat. It's a salad, fleishik is salad. And, yeah.
Where I come from, they put smeared on the meat.
Oh yeah, that's yeah.
Another question. When you
Yeah.
add vinegar to a salad, you're
Right.
not cooking anything.
Right.
So the volume of the salad contributes to the spreading and reducing.
No, but that would be more of a problem of eating the two together. Not,
And then you have the salad with meat. Of course.
Right. That's all, yeah.
So I'm saying the volume of the carrots or you've got in your salad actually contribute towards the adding to the, since you're not using heat. So it remains concentrated in there.
yeah.
The tomatoes don't necessarily reduce the taste.
No, they
of it.
don't. They don't.
Participate,
Right.
contribute to this bottle.
Right.
You would have to either use heat,
It would have to be with heat.
or you would have to use something else that's
Another liquid. Because if it's with salads, leafy vegetables and things like that, it would not. It was the time will still be there.
Right.
Yeah, even though it spreads over a lot, even though it does spread, you
Not
have
necessarily even.
it's not. Yeah,
It's
exactly.
concentrated.
It could be. it's more concentrated in one area than another.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So then you can't say altogether I have 6 because but maybe your whole vinegar and kuta is only.
But then you
1/3.
may not really need. Well, the question is whether you really need shishim there.
If you're having the salad with.
What?
If you're having the salad with.
Oh, if you're having it together.
Yeah, of course,
So,
with tomatoes and you don't need
Yeah.
any bittel because
Yeah.
tomatoes are.
yeah. Yeah, that would be interesting. Because if we're talking about a fleishike salad, and you're having that mixed, that Melicha vinegar, which sometimes, by the way, it could be an ingredient.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's in thousand eyes, but
Yeah.
some kind of.
Right. At some point, anyway, at some point would be bottle also. In case of all kinds of that will somehow dilute.
But you're adding the to
Yeah, I
that
think
whatever.
I think it will dilute it either. Yeah.
But you're adding the milk to this whatever sauce you're going 1,000
Yeah.
whatever
Yeah, yeah, uh-huh.
You're adding the milk to give it a special taste.
That's correct.
So you're interested in the taste. Interested in the taste, then it's not bubble. Like we said in the case of
If you want that
the
particular
right,
taste,
right.
yeah.
If you don't want the taste, what are you putting milk in for?
Yeah.
So if it's part of the recipe, then it adds.
Yeah, but the
something.
question is what exactly which part of the taste do you want?
Of the milk, obviously.
Oh, the milk.
Well,
yeah.
otherwise, why are you adding the milk into the 1,000
Yeah.
or whatever sauce you're making?
Yeah, but in the end, it still wouldn't matter. In the end,
Or for the color or
Yeah.
consistency, but
Obviously.
something of that the milk adds something that you're. And
Yeah.
once you're adding something interested in, I thought that would
then
be
it receives a greater,
importance.
more importance.
And also, it means noticeable in the added quality. of
Yeah,
what
that
you're
can be an issue in some foods. Yeah, when a particular ingredient is a required ingredient.
You brought that example.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. And you give it more importance.
It's by Taaruvot, it's by
Yeah.
Isser.
All right. Anyway, so that was the Rashi. Rashi in explaining the problem, the potential problem, how it can mixed up by mistake, inadvertently seeing it, same colors and so forth. The Rambam, interestingly, says a totally different reason. That when you look at the Rambam, you say, Rambam, didn't you see the Gemara inside? That's your first reaction, because he says the two of them being together, what happens is that that kutach, or I should say the salt, has the ability intrinsically to absorb the kutach. It draws the flavor. Just by being next to it, it is able to draw, this must be strong salt, the flavoring in the kutach, the melichiks, and then you have a melichik salt being used in flesh. So look at the Raavad there. The Raavad says, wait a minute. I mean, granted that these things can occur in real life, that because of the physics of or whatever chemistry of two ingredients in close proximity, but the Gemara somewhat does say that what's the difference between chometz and milk and the kutach is that one is bein and one is not. Right? Let me see if I have it here, if I wrote it down here. Yeah.
But those are two different.
No. But let me see if I can bring it up over here. Wanted to see the lashon. Yeah, this is the lashon here in the Gemara. Hai isa isura be'ene, ve'hai leisa isura be'ene. Kutach hanoifel be'melach, kutach falling into the salt, nira ve'nikar. If they should be av, it's thicker, velo bottle, aval kutach hanoifel be'chometz leisa be'ene. Tamu name lo yoid kutach be'chometz, it doesn't even give tam in the chometz. So anyway, so we see from the Gemara that the main differentiation between kutach melach versus kutach vinegar is that when you have it with the melach, it will be somewhat detectable, somewhat present, and with the vinegar not. So what does the Rambam here introduce? A whole different, brand new idea of drawing. You see the question? Mm-hmm. Drawing? So what does that have to do with it? So the Raavad says the Rambam must have had a different girsa in the Gemara. No, the Rambam had a different version.
Yeah, the Rambam is saying.
The Rambam is saying that the proximity of the two, the salt next to the kutach, through the air. In other words, just by being next to each other, one is able to draw, not one, this is the salt, is able to draw from the milk something from it, moisture from it, and turn itself into a little bit more of a melichic salt. And maybe that should be a good experiment to try one day. I don't know how you would be able to detect, how long it will take. It definitely won't happen right away. But over time, perhaps if the two are next to each other, we do know, for example, that a flower pot that has a hole in the bottom does draw nutrients from the ground. It's a flower pot that does not have a hole. There is something like that things travel through the air. But here, this melach has a power somehow to draw into it, to draw from the kutach into it.
But it can't be that slow. So that whatever drawing the Rambam thinks is the cow.
Well, it all depends how much is being drawn, because if you have really mamoshas, if you really...
He's saying this is getting to be more than that.
It's not just a balua. What you're talking about is an isur balua that Enya ben Yoma will help. Here it's not just a balua so much, it's actually absorbing part of the kutach. Yeah. Which is interesting, I admit. Yeah, interesting. That's what he says. Now, not everybody goes along with his shita, but the Prima Gordon at least says we should be machmir like the two of them. What do you mean like the two of them? Well, according to the Rambam, they would need to be far away, and according to Rashi, they would at least need to be covered. So when the Prima Gordon says we should be machmir like the two opinions, he means keep them apart plus keep them covered. That's what the Prima Gordon explains in being machmir like the two of them. But what's interesting is that you would have a nafka between Rashi and the Rambam regarding cheese and regarding milk. What would be according to the Rambam, cheese and milk don't make a difference. It draws from the two of them. But the way Rashi learns, if we're talking about liquid milk, then liquid milk would be like chometz, right? You wouldn't reckon. When will you have a problem potentially when you have cheese, when you have something like kuta? But if you had liquid milk as a liquid, then it's like vinegar. It's a liquid. See, so according to Rashi, you may have a difference here depending on what kind of a melicha dish you had. If it's a liquid, Rambam, from the way he explains the Gemara, it wouldn't make a difference. If it absorbs from the two of them. Yeah.
I was wondering, the salty air there, am I imagining it?
No, there's salt in the water in the Amalek too.
But there's no salt in the
Well, listen, wherever there is a certain saltiness in the air, perhaps, in the ground, sure.
People have psoriasis.
Right.
There.
Sure, it helps them.
And or the water.
No, they go for the water, the mud, the minerals, yeah.
Yeah. They sell these things, they can do it.
Oh, sure, they should take it with them,
Yeah.
All right, that was Sif Hey. Sif Vav, mutar litem besoicha, mutar litem betoich teva, kat shel basar etzel shel chalav. Let's say you have a box. Remember the old refrigerators? It was a box. They called them an ice box, right? So this doesn't have to be an ice box, but a box. It could even be a knapsack. Somebody's going on a trip. It could be a cooler. Anything small. He says, you're allowed to put betoch teva, in a box, kat shel basar etzel shel chalav. A jar of meat next to a jar of milk. This one you don't have a problem with? I have a problem with the cheese, with the kutach and the salt. Why? Because over there, I may forget, or I may not realize and notice, and use that salt to salt my flesh. But here, I'm going to be more careful. I'm going to watch out. I mean, this is Melicha and fleishiks themselves. Well, ideally.
If you're carrying it.
Well, obviously, if you're carrying it, it's got to be covered. You don't want any spillage.
Right.
But this, the place can bring this halacha l'maisa, where we learn from this, that in your refrigerator, this is the halacha about refrigerator, that ideally, if possible, keep milk products away from fleshik products. You have leftover chicken, leftover cholent, you put it in the fridge. You have a bottle of milk, don't put them in the same shelf. You may drip in it. If you can designate different parts of the refrigerator for different, for melachas and fleishiks. We don't all do that. We don't have, and not everybody has big refrigerators and you have lots of whatever food, all kinds of food. But if possible, if at all possible, try to keep them apart. That's what this halacha is about. He says Mechaber says it's fine. It's okay because we're not
That's
so.
what I'm wondering.
Mechaber
Mechaber says it's okay, and you say, well, what the halacha is about is keeping them apart. It seems like
Why?
Mechaber is saying you don't need to keep
Because of
them
the
apart.
Ramah.
Yeah, the Ramah says.
יש מחמיר לכתחילה.
Yesh machmir.
Yeah. וטוב להיזהר להתחכם במקום שאין צריך. You don't really need to.
Right.
If you're taking a knapsack, I mean, you're going to close them anyway. You're going to keep them together. Right? In a cooler, you're going to be careful. But if you have a big refrigerator, you have the room, just keep them apart. Right? It can happen.
There's nothing wrong with art.
Right.
And even if one
It's
falls
excellent.
together,
Right.
remember, a refrigerator is not exactly hot. With
Yeah,
something
it's cold.
cooking.
Yeah, it's cold. Yeah, it's cold.
So you rinse it off.
Yeah, but it could. All these things, you should know, they can happen. You know,
can
you
happen.
move them, and they fell on each other. And then what are you going to do? How do you remove milk from chicken? Cold. You have to rinse out the whole thing. Are you going to do that, really?
It's a turfa.
It's a teracha, too. You can do it like Elon said, it's not hot. You can get away with it.
Certainly there's no reason to do it if you can avoid it.
Container.
Yeah, maybe, open container. I mean, the chicken is pretty much leftover, so it's open. They may have some aluminum foil on it, and then you have...
Ziploc.
By the way, have you ever bought a milk, and when you brought it home, noticed that it was leaking? Did it ever happen to you? What? That too? No, but I'm talking about real leaking from the carton.
The carton,
Yeah, sure. I've had to put it into a jar. Leaking, it fell in. All kinds of ways. So he says there's no issue putting them next to each other because we don't have the problem with the melech that you may use, that you always use with flesh.
Regarding the milk, it says most people have a different formula for milk.
We're going to get to that. Yeah, we're going to get to that. Yeah, we're going to get to that. Yeah. All right, we're going to see that in Sif Zayin. In Sif Zayin, which is the last Sif of the Siman, Mechaber says melech hanatun b'kara shel basar mutar litno b'chalav. Let's say you had a fleishike bowl. You've always used that for some fleishike, for soup, fleishike soup, whatever. It's a fleishike bowl, and you decide to fill it up with salt. You need a salt, something to contain the salt, and you keep it there, stored there for a while. You can take this salt now and put it into a Melicha dish. You're making something Melicha. You can take this salt, even though it's been sitting for a long time, in a fleishike bowl. Cold, of course. Salt was sitting in the fridge. Yeah, it's clean and everything. You go ahead and use it. Why? It's fleishik. No, it's not. The bowl is not the salt. Salt, we're going to be learning in Melicha, salt does not have the koach to draw out by itself blias. Blias, things that are absorbed in the keli. Meliach keroteach we'll learn. It's very powerful. Meliach, saltiness, we already learned a little bit about it. By food items, it could cause trouble. But not by kelim, for the most part. So melech hanatum v'karashlo, if it's in a fleshike bowl, go ahead. Mutar litno v'chalav. So the Ramah comes along, says, wait a minute. I'd like to add something to this. It's like he says, Nachab is right. Machmir gam bezeh tavo la bracha. Here he says, you know what? If you're machmir with this too, not to use this kind of a salt for milchiks, you should be blessed. There are some that do not allow for people to do this lechatchila, but everybody agrees that it's not a problem. But why do this lechatchila? We want to separate fleishiks from melechiks altogether, and that is why the Marshal brings something very interesting. Marshal says, I praise the Ashkenazi minhag, the Ashkenaz minhag. Yeah? They have separate salt shakers from melechiks. He noticed that once. No, but he meant Germany.
Oh, they're left on the Germans.
I think so. I think that's what he meant. Yes. Not Bavaria.
Oh, you should.
Right?
They're separate shakers from me.
Yeah. Anyway.
Maybe in Munich.
Maybe. Yeah. So he says, I like that. Why? It's like this, because if their hands were to be dirty or greasy with meat, and here they're touching something from the milkshake, from the melechiks, it would be a problem. But if they have separate shakers, then that's great. Because sometimes, your hands are greasy. Yeah, you're greasy. So, okay, you take a flesh shaker, a salt shaker, no problem. So take whatever. Go grab the milk and salt shaker. No, you can have all your grease on it. So if people's hands are greasy, it definitely makes more sense to take the flesh shaker. So, in reality, are we makber that in their home? Well, depends what you're eating. You're eating a lunch, you're eating something parv, you can grab any any salt shaker. You don't have to get the milk, get the fleishik. It's not a must. You need a little bit for your bread when you wash the motzi. But, as the Marshal points out, we traditionally do have separate salt shakers. Even different colors sometimes, or that we use. Do you have to have it? No. He says it's a good minhag. Now, I saw the Marshal add something else, which I think is a big chumrah too. Marshal brings down that he noticed that the oilam, people are makbid, that wherever you put down a fleishike pot, don't put there a milchike pot. Pesach. Why do people cover their tables? Why do people cover their countertops? Why do it? You don't cook over them. What's wrong? It's clean. Definitely it's clean. There's no chametz on it. Why do you have to cover it? It's an extra chumrah for Pesach. Pesach, there's a lot of chumras. It's not a real requirement. Why not? Let's say you put a Pesach dike hot pot on the counter. What could happen? There's blias there of chametz. Is that pot going to take out the blias from the stone?
No.
Have you also the tataka bar, and the bottom one is
right.
So the maximum could affect the one from above would be kiddush.
Exactly.
But when you have two, the maximum effect when both of them are hot is kedei kliv involved.
Only if there's right. Yeah, we're not talking about kedim. We're talking about the counter, not town.
So
just the counter, the table.
Doesn't have a din of kedim?
Oh, so it may, depending on the material that it's made out of. Yeah.
Well, there are materials where you don't have
Right. Exactly.
Like
So at the most,
granite.
Granite is not a problem because it's not porous. So anyway, so the most you may have is a klipa, maybe, right? And that would only affect the pot, not the food. Okay. Anyway, Pesach or machmer, it's definitely better to do it, clean it very well. Some people are machshir it with power. They pour hot boiling water, depending on the materials made up. Some do it that way and they cover it, all depending on the material. Is it a real must? No. First of all, not everybody puts hot pots of kli rishon on top of a counter.
Many countertops will get that.
Exactly, you don't do that, especially not on formica. Right? And formica is one of those materials that is a problem to kasher. So who's going to do that anyway? You're not going to put it there. But on some tile, they occasionally may put something out of the fire. But again, it's not a good idea to get used to putting your hot pots on the countertops of any. So therefore, if you did, cover it up for Pesach, clean it. And here he says, there's a minhag, I've noticed it, they don't put it wherever. Why? Because maybe some meat spilled, or whatever it is. And here you come with the opposite type of a pot, the opposite type of food, and it may absorb. So it's more remote kind of concern, but it is sometimes a little bit of a concern, so they don't do that. So the kitchen, obviously, it's difficult to remember where you put what, unless you have a side. This is a fleishik side, this is a melicha side, and then you don't have that kind of a problem.
Interesting. Laws and so.
Yeah, imagine. You see, they were particular about.
And that was the origin source of.
That's incredible. Yeah, could you understand that? Yeah, they were very careful on certain things. Yeah. 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 Go ahead. Right.
It's not our time yet.
You're right.
In blue,
Between Kalim, right.
okay.
Also not, yeah.
You have no money more by the time
Exactly.
you
Right. But by Pesach, remember, the Eno Ben Yom is not so much the criteria. Yeah, Jose Venir, yeah.
So
Yeah, but Pesach, the Eno Ben Yom is not going to necessarily help that much. Yeah, but Jose Venir is also not exactly applying over here. It depends if it's Lach, if it's Yovesh. Let's not get into that right now. But you're right. I mean, you can make various suggestions as to why it shouldn't be a problem. I understand what you're saying. Yeah. But we're machmer Pesach l'chatchila to be concerned about every little thing, including something like that in case there is something there, even though it's old, it's clean, this is very, very hot, maybe it does absorb. There are shittas that are more machmer than others, so of course we don't want to leave any room for a doubt. So that's why on Pesach we're extra careful. But here too, with fleishiks and melichiks, obviously you want to have harchakas, and you want to have as much as possible separation between. All right, that was Siman Tzadik Hey. What we'll do now, we just have about 5 minutes or so, just an introduction for Siman Tzadik Vov. Just a brief introduction. Siman Tzadik Vov deals about din machal charif shenechtach b'sakin shel basar. something very spicy. I use the word spicy, not hot, because hot you may think of heat. But even though hot can also mean chili hot and not heat. So think of spicy, but not spicy in the sense that it's just a condiment like paprika. Spicy means chili. Really hot to the mouth, to the palate. I guess you can call it in English. Is that the right word? Yeah? Okay. All right. Onions. Okay. Think of onions. I actually think of snog, because that's the example used over here. All right. Yeah, we'll talk about that. Yeah, about habanero, yeah. So here we're going to be dealing with machal harif shenechtach besakin shel basar. So we're going to talk about various kinds of things that are harif, very sharp, very spicy, that were cut with a sakin. Now, this sakin, this knife is not hot. We already know by now, we learned it from Siman Tzadik Dalet, I believe, that if you used a knife over hot meat, cutting a knife, using a Melicha knife to cut your steak, it's a problem. Why is it a problem? The knife is not hard, it's not hot. It's not cooked, this thing. You're not cooking, it's just a hot piece of meat sitting on the plate. Yeah, but there's something called duchka de sakin. So we learned that the combination of the cutting of a knife, the sharpness, the edge of the knife, cutting through hot meat, not cold meat, hot meat, the combination of the two, poses a problem, a big problem. It's the tam of the sakin is nivla into the meat. Yeah, because you're cutting, the knife pushing through, duchka the sakin, pushing through together with hot meat, you can do it. But if you have cold fish, and the guy used his knife to cut squids, oysters, and catfish, whatever. And now he's using it on your salmon. We said it's okay. Why? As long as, of course, he cleaned his knife. It's cold. The sake, but it's sake, yeah, but it's cold. So the most, you cut the edges of where his sake went through. Or you rinse it well. Because, there may still be some shamnunas there in his sake, so you want to remove the edges. You want to rinse it. And that's how the Gemara says it. That's what you would do when dealing with vegetables that are not hot. Kishut, watermelon, or gourd, or cucumbers, all kinds of vegetables that are very, how should I say, just cold and easy to clean. That you can remove the edges or just rinse them out. Then do that. But it becomes more complicated if you're using a knife in conjunction with hot food. Here, we're talking about another situation where you're using a knife. There's no hot food, but there is something very spicy, something very hot in a different way hot. And it's called the machal harif. Now, according to the Gemara, one of the machalim achi harifi, not talking about chili right now, but one of the foods that is the most, how should we say, hot in the sense that it's quite spicy, that it has because of that it has quite a bit of strength to it in doing certain things, is called chiltit. And I'm sure if you go today to the Israel market and you ask chiltit, nobody will know what you're talking about. Because even the average individual who knows about vegetables, plants, and herbs has never heard of this. Even in English. What is it called in English? Something like asafoida. That's the combination of Farsi Latin name given to this plant. ASA, or SSA, FOEDIA, or FOE, something like that. You're welcome to look it up, you'll find it on the internet.
They went across the street.
Maybe they may have it. Now, it is good for certain things. Yeah, it is good for certain things to treat asthma, to treat constipation, to treat diarrhea maybe too. Like it's the opposite. One of those. They eat it a lot. They use what it is the latex from the root of certain plants that are very similar to fennel, and used a lot in Afghanistan, Iran, the Middle East. It was common in the Middle East years ago. And it stinks when you first take it out. It stinks so much that the English description of it is the devil's dung. Did you hear that one? So if you ever want to look it up, devil's dung, and that in Spanish and various other languages too, you can put that in and you'll find it. Once you cook it, it resembles the taste and the aroma resembles leeks. You don't want to eat it. You don't want to eat too much of it because then it's poisonous. And you don't really want to eat it in its raw state. You want to cook it. Animals usually eat it. It's more of an animal food. So I think that's what they used to do. Well, they used to use it as medicine too. But and in India, it's used as a spice like curry. It's to enhance certain spices. That's what it enhances certain spices. So they use it in combination with certain, but not by itself. I don't think anybody eats it by itself. I'm almost sure it was more of an animal food. So anyway, the Gemara somehow mentions this as an example of all other spices as something that, if you were to cut that, with a knife, a lot of halachas change. Which halachas are affected? For the most part, 3 halachas are going to be affected here with machal chorev. There are 3 inyonim that are chidushim. You can call it chidushim. And what's interesting is that this is the same Gemara that speaks about dogim she'olu beka'ara. Remember the case of fish, hot fish, putting them down in the Melicha plate, or I should say a fleshika plate, and then eating it with Melichiks. So we said it was a question of nat by nat. So dogim she'olu beka'ara mutar l'ochle bechutach. Right after that nat by nat, you have the case of tznon shechatcho besakin shechatach bo basar. A radish. Here the Gemara is using an example first with a radish, which is interesting. A radish that was cut using a fleshika knife. Don't use that radish with milk. Asur l'ochlo bekutach. So the Gemara says, "Hanimil etznon." We're talking about a radish. Agav churfe bola, because of the charifut, because of the sharpness of the tznon and of the sakin together, then it is able to absorb into the tznon, the blias of the sakin. Aval kishut garir li bepaske beachil. You have other vegetables that you don't have to be sweet vegetables. All kinds of calabasas, pumpkins, gourds. They would all come under the category of kishut. In other words, these are sweet. You wouldn't have a problem. What would you do? Like you do with the fish. You would cut along the edges. You would rinse it out very well. And whatever was there would come off with the water or with the little bit that you remove. It would be okay. It would not spread through the entire vegetable like it would through its snot. And that's one of the things we'll talk about is how much actually spreads. How much does the sakin, the tam, the bli, how much does it actually spread into an onion? Because this is a very, very relevant question. Very, very relevant. My wife cuts an onion. She puts it back in the refrigerator. She doesn't use the whole thing. I'm making an omelet and mushrooms. I say, oh, an onion. Oh, I said to myself, she probably used a fleshika knife to cut it with. Lately, I don't think so. I think lately she tells me I used parva knives to cut my onions.
Does she have a cell phone?
Why?
Don't rely on it if she she's on the cell phone.
She's not. I think because of that, because then you could use the onion for anything you want. If you have a leftover onion, well, chaval. Why open up another onion? I mean, you see what I mean?
Does it make a difference that it's a metal? That make any difference?
Well, if it has a blade,
It has a blade, but it's
not metal, then it may not really be boilea. If it's
that's
not.
it.
Yeah. It also, I guess it's a good question. I wouldn't trust it so much because we're machmir on plastics too and all kinds of things. But technically, you may have a good point that if it comes.
At least you have an atu.
Yeah, well, atu, yeah, for sure. But I'm saying technically, as we say, technically, he may have a point that if it was not, it may not have had any blias. Like glass, according to this finding, for example.
Right, but I don't think anyone says that milk.
Why not?
I mean,
For the
do we have
safari.
such a-
I don't think so because
Because
I haven't heard of a glass
because
knife.
because the very person is used to.
The last time I heard of a glass knife was an actual piece of glass being used for shechita.
Yeah, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
That would be
You
me.
sell these ceramic knives.
Yeah.
That would be me. But, but the point is, even if someone uses a plastic knife for that, he might get used to when it happens.
Obviously,
It's a
yeah.
metal knife, you know.
So anyway, so what are the 3 areas that we need to just keep in mind before getting? Next week we'll get into the Siman. Is that whoever cuts something harif like a radish, because that's the example that the Gemara uses.
What's a silka? A beet.
Usually silka means a beet.
It says wheat is.
No, here it is. Here it's not. I just have to double check. I have to double check because here it appears to be that it's grain.
Grain?
Grain is made of cow.
Some sort of grain. Some sort of grain. Well,
Yeah, horseradish.
it's horseradish. Yeah.
But it's not born this way.
Well, it has horseradish plus beets.
It depends what.
Yeah.
The red one does.
The white one they mix when they duck.
Yeah, the white one is radish, isn't it?
Something else in it, but it's beef.
Yeah. I have to double check exactly what.
Isn't the white grain actually?
Yeah. Did you check what it shows there for Tardin?
For what?
The English. What it shows? No, for Tardin.
Tardin.
Yeah. In the if you have the file there. Yeah. While you're looking for it, I'll just go. So anyway, but this is one example that three important halachas that would make a difference here. One is that so if you cut a double charif like it's known with a knife that has shamnunis basar on it, that it still has a little bit of residue, a little bit of grease, a little bit of the meat on it, then for sure the combination of sakin and snon, the snon will absorb whatever was there, even though neither of the two of them are hot. So what would this do? It would mean that even though neither of the two of them are hot, that this snon will become fleshik as a result of absorbing whatever was there without any heat. That's number one. What if there's no shamnunis? If there's no grease on top of it, on top of the knife, only balua, it's also nesa. In other words, it also becomes asur. If there was let's say a blia of isur, this was from a goy, it becomes asur. It's known because even though it's only a balua, the combination of the two is able to extract the blia too. The duch of the sakina together with the double charis is able to extract the tam of the blias in the sakin. Number two, the famous kula leniency of nat bar nat would not apply to this situation with a double charif like it's known. So if you cut it with a knife, you can't eat it with something hot. In other words, the opposite of it. In other words, this is fleishiks and you can eat it with melichiks. Because even though nat bar nat applies with, for example, certain food items that were not cooked but were just heated, because of nat bar nat, here, because it's of the sharpness of the tznon and the ducha de sakina, we don't say that there's a nat bar nat. It goes directly into it. It becomes like it, pretty much. So the leniency of nat bar nat cannot be applied over here. The dover chorif actually helps draw all the tam that's in the sakin, all the balloon in the sakin. And therefore, what's nat bar nat? The tam is niklash, it's weakened. Here it's not weakened. That's how it's understood in the Shach and based on how he learns Rashi. Now what's interesting about this particular idea of nat bar nat is that Tosas, in bringing down the various shittas of nat bar nat, if you remember, we learned the sheet of the Rivon. Rivon says there's no nat bar nat by cooking. Because cooking is so powerful that it actually draws out, according to his opinion, draws out the tam directly into the food. Because of the bubbling now. So the Tosas want to say, hey, by the way, from this halacha of davar charif and sakin, this be a good raya for the Rivon? If a davar charif with a sakin, nat bar nat does not apply, the more so bishul, which is more powerful, that it shouldn't apply. Comes along the Sefer Trumas, who's the one that holds bishul is very good for nat bar nat, and says no. Davar charif, you know why? Because davar charif is more powerful than bishul. You know, not that it's more powerful, that when it comes to nat bar nat, it's more powerful. In bishul, because you have the waters and you have the whole dynamics of the way bishul works, you have a real nat bar nat. But davar charif, he says, enochiname, is more powerful for these purposes than bishul. That it actually does not allow for nat bar nat to ever happen, because it's so hot, so spicy.
But he has something on his side,
No, that's something else. That's the third halacha.
But that's also something that is effective, removing a pram that's already there.
Yeah, but that's not with nat bar nat. That applies to that applies the machalil shvach applies to the third halacha of eino ben yoyim. Yeah. It's a third halacha.
That's already lost its ability to usher.
Yeah.
And it's rejuvenated
right.
and requires that.
That's correct. Yeah.
So it's similarity.
Yeah. That's the third halacha, basically. That's the third din over here. That the kula of Eino ben Yoma does not apply in a Dover Choref. Why? Because of what Ilan said. I already said not by not, yeah. But we have three things that don't apply. Number one, it would become fleishiks, even though it was not Ritzeach. The din of a ducha de sakina with the Dover Choref makes the Dover Choref like the din, or like the sakin itself, even though there's no heat involved. Whether it's shanunis, or even if it's just blias, it becomes like it. Number two, the din of dan banat does not apply. And number three, Eino ben Yoma does not apply because the Dover Choref here makes, like Ilan said, machri leleshvach. The time that was there not dormant, it was already stale, if you can use that word. All of a sudden, it comes along the spice, transforms it back to a shvach. So Eino ben Yoma is not a leniency here anymore. Right, it rejuvenates it. But what we will see that there's a big machlokes rishonim and does at least for the Eino ben Yoma part. Is that only by tznon and chiltis, or is there anything that's spicy that we say this like the Eino ben Yoma? What about onions? Onions is not radish. Do we say that can an onion do something Eino ben Yoma to a ben Yoma? Or specifically only the Gemara's case? By the way, because some say it's only those two the Gemara mentions, because the Gemara could have said anything sharp. The Gemara said these two, so maybe they only meant this two. So that's a good question. We hold the halacha lemaisa that we're machmir in all very, very hot, spicy stuff like onions, radishes, and things like that. That we're careful, especially with the other leniencies of not by not, and the other one. But a gabe Eino ben Yoma, you could be lenient if you have to. You could be mitzaref that to another heter, because the Gemara does say only two: the chiltis and the tznon. But anyway, so that's something that we will discuss more in depth next week. What's interesting, however, is if you recall, we had a Ramah in Tzadik Hein, the beginning of the Siman, that when he mentioned briefly about, he was talking about Nat Banat, so he mentioned Dover Choref. He says Dover Choref, will ruin the whole Nat Banat. And he even said, the Ramah said, Chozek shamach alinu Dover Choref, but imo yo Dover Choref kigon shebishlu varim charifim bechli shel basar. They cooked hot, spicy food. Cooked? Where's the sakin? The Ramah actually brought an example of Dover Choref being a problem even in the cooking in a pot. No sakin. Remember that one? We're learning here about a sakin. The combination of sakin with roteya, the combination of sakin with spicy food. Okay, it's a combination of two powers, two forces. But the Ramah had an example of if you cooked with spicy food that pot, you may have a problem, even if you thought it was Eino ben Yoma, now it's a ben Yoma. Not everybody agrees with that Ramah. It seems to be that, I mean, a lot of places are saying it has to be a sakin.
What's wrong with the spice?
The Piskei Tshuva brings down here, I think here or before, especially there are some Achronim that hold that this is only beduchka de sakina, not with cooking. If you cooked in a pot with spicy food, those spices do not have that koach to make the content, not the content, but to make the pot ben yoma already. If you have it sakin together with its non, then you may be able to have a problem over here. That between the two of them, the blias in the sakin are like they were ben yoma. But if you cooked with them, so that's some of the questions that we will be dealing with here. That's part of what Siman Tzadik Vav is all about. And he speaks, and later on the Mechaber speaks about garlic, onions, leeks, sour fruits, what their din is, or spices that were ground. All of these kind of scenarios that it's not so clear from the Gemara what was meant, what it applies. But obviously, if this does come up in the home, any one of those very, very hot, spicy vegetables, it could be an issue. If you use the knife, obviously, if you caught it on time, you just have to know not to use it with the wrong with the wrong type. It's not a fork or a spoon, it's a knife. And that's where the problem is. It's a knife in combination with not just a cucumber. Cucumber, you just wash it off, rinse it off. You eat it with your pizza. But if you're talking about an onion in conjunction with a knife, then you're dealing with an area in Halacha that basically says you have to be machmir. There's no way about it. That onion or radish or whatever has become fleishiks. just by the fact that it was cut, even though there's no heat involved. It's spiciness of the vegetable together with the knife.
What about us?
Yeah. Yeah, sure. It's not only a knife that is serrated. It could be any. This halacha should apply to anything, because it's a blade. It applies a certain amount of force, and
It has this action.
yeah, it's not so much. Yeah, you're right. It could be, but I wouldn't infringe. We would definitely have there's more pressure applied with a slicer than there is with a fork or a spoon. There's no question about it. And that's why there's a special din of, especially if it's Michael Choref. If it's an apple, as we said, no big deal. But if it's a Michael Choref, that's going to make a difference. Okay, continue next week into the Siman.